Greetings, baseball fans, and welcome back to Cigarettes and Bubblegum, an ongoing series of baseball retrospectives taking aim at popular narratives with a critical eye. Last month, I took a look at the idea that they are watering down the Hall of Fame these days, and I feel that in the course of that video, I reasonably debunked that narrative. But with the recent announcements that Randy Johnson and CC Sabathia would have their numbers retired by the Mariners and Yankees, respectively, in the upcoming season, there is perhaps a less commonly voiced narrative that caught my interest. Are we retiring too many numbers these days? Up front, let me just say this is not about Johnson. I had to do a double take on him because I actually thought the Mariners retired his number years ago. No, this is mainly about Sabathia, a great pitcher, a worthy Hall of Famer, and by my own reckoning, an all-time Yankee. But well, in the very post that I saw the announcement, the first comment was from a Yankee fan asking why. And okay, Sabathia pitched there for 11 years. He was a three-time All-Star, a 20-game winner in 2010, and twice led the league in wins, and that's about it. That's a perfectly fine run. He went 134 and 88 with a 112 ERA plus, but is that number retired by the Yankees good? But it got me thinking. Are we asking less of a player these days when it comes to having their numbers retired than we used to? And honestly, when I did the Hall of Fame video, I knew ahead of time what the results would be. I've been running those numbers for years now. But in this case, yeah, I didn't really know. And before we get to the actual data, let me just say that a team retiring a guy's number is not the same as him being in the Hall of Fame. What I mean is, being a Hall of Famer has a singular definition. We quibble about who fits the definition and how to interpret it, but it remains a relatively simple concept. Baseball's highest honor to its greatest players. But when it comes to individual teams, not every great player does the same for every team. Personally, as great as Henry Aaron and Willie Mays were, I think it's silly that the Brewers and Mets retired their numbers. They were certainly great players, but they played less than 2 years on each of those clubs. Aaron being barely mediocre and Mays being legitimately terrible. You've also got cases like Jim Umbrich in Houston, who died suddenly during the season of an unexpected illness. The team wanted to honor him, and rather than do the black armband thing, they retired his number. Were they wrong to do that? Not necessarily. It was a nice gesture. I'm sure his family appreciated it. But 60 years later, nobody remembers why they did it. The point is just that teams have a much more subjective judgment when it comes to retiring numbers, and this is not a recent phenomenon. So, I honestly did not know going in what I was going to find. Once again, as with the Hall of Fame video, I am using WAR, and once again I fully realize that many will balk at a WAR-based analysis, but if intellectual curiosity is an attribute you possess, go ahead and stick around. As with that video, I am again averaging the WAR numbers from Baseball Reference and Fangraphs, but this time I'm not going to add together pitching WAR and hitting WAR. There were a couple of players in that video, Babe Ruth and Monty Ward in particular, that I felt needed that treatment, and it's an easy enough list to generate when you're looking at whole careers. But it would be very tedious to do on a per-team basis. Plus, I had already generated the necessary lists when I did the all-time teams, and I really didn't feel like doing it all over again. And really, this would only apply to Ruth, and honestly, not even him. 99% of his pitching was done in Boston, and he didn't wear a number there for them to retire. Which brings me to the final point. I'm only counting retired numbers, not retired or honored numberless jerseys. I feel like those are a bit of a cop-out. Just a couple of teams asking, so who is our best dead ball era player? So the Ty Cobbs and Christy Mathewsons of the world are not included here. Only actual retired numbers. So all that said, what do we get? Well, here is a scatter plot of WAR versus the years that each number was retired. I think you can see the obvious trend already. Let's throw in a trend line and damn, 0.53 wins per year. That's more than 1.5 times worse than the Hall of Fame's decline from birth to the height of the Frankie Frisch era. In that video, I pointed out that the decline in value over the length of time in question was roughly the same amount as Tommy McCarthy's entire career. But at this rate, this decline over this amount of time would amount to more value than the careers of about a third of the guys on the graph. But if you remember what I did with that video, let's acknowledge that a similar thing is going on here. We're starting with Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth, and that can't be the standard, or there would only be like half a dozen other retired numbers, which would be fine, but other teams wanted in on the action. And prior to 1969, the third round of league expansion, it seemed like 60-plus WAR was more or less the standard, excepting Jim Umbrich in Houston. And since 1969, it's been off to the races, it would seem. So let's cut it off there and see what we get. 0.3 wins per year. Still a decline, and even over the reduced time period, still greater than the values of a good chunk of the guys with retired numbers, and roughly the same as the rate of decline in the Hall from 1939 through the Frankie Frisch era. So, yeah, for what it's worth, a lot of guys are getting their number retired these days and have contributed a lot less than the guys of the past. Now, is that a problem? Are we retiring too many numbers? That's a judgment call. I won't go so far as to say that we are and that it is a problem. As I said, teams retire numbers for a variety of reasons, some subjective and sentimental, and some for more than just what they did on the field. Joe Cronin and Johnny Pesky both had their numbers retired with Boston, and neither is even on my all-time team. But they put in time as managers, coaches, in the front office, etc., and WAR, or indeed any stat, would not capture that. So I'm not saying that teams are wrong to do this, but if you feel that the honor is being given to lesser players than it has in the past, there is definitely some legitimacy to that. When is it too much? Well, there are only 101 possible uniform numbers under the current system, 1 through 99, 0, and 00. And there are currently 40 men on a roster. So mathematically, no team can retire more than 61 numbers and still be able to outfit their team. But the Yankees, who've retired the most numbers by far, currently at 23, even at this rate, are a generation away from being even halfway there. So it's fine, I guess. Worst case, they go to 3-digit numbers. Just remember when they do, Cleveland has already retired number 455. If you're still here, you must have enjoyed this, so please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Help me get it on the map, and once I'm retired and afterwards, I do hope to see you at the ballpark.